What's up, Internet? You're tuning in episode 135 of the FlipScreen Games Podcast, a weekly video game podcast where two best buds from different nations come together to discuss the wide world of video games. I'm your host, Pete and Bessie, joined as always by my very good friend and co-host, Mr. Stephen Radford.
Hello, hello.
Welcome back, buddy. It's been a minute.
It has indeed. I've moved house, so I'm kind of not in my usual setup at the moment, but I will be soon enough, I guess.
Push that mic center, buddy.
I can. It's like off over here, but I'll try
You got to
as
scooch
best
over.
as I
Okay,
can.
all right, okay. Live from Steve's new apartment. It's the FlipScreen Games Podcast. It's good to have you back, man. How was the move?
Yeah, stressful, but pretty good, I think. It's just a long process of digging through boxes. I was missing a single cable tonight, and God knows which box that's in. So we'll find it eventually, I'm sure.
It's like I can see like your arcade cabinet behind you, but it's like turned off. It's like it looks like you're like in a horror movie, you know, or
It
something.
does, yeah. I feel like I'm being interrogated. I've got one light on in the room because I put the light on above me, and it was like bleeding into the crappy MacBook camera that I'm using at the moment. So it's not exactly professional at the moment.
It reminds me of that horror movie that like the entire thing takes place like on a MacBook or whatever, you know, and it's like,
oh yeah,
like I'm waiting for someone to like come up
that.
behind you and strangle you, you know.
We should do an episode like that at some point, you know, just a Halloween scary one where all of a sudden someone jumps out.
That would be so funny if it's like a regular episode for like 20 minutes and then it's like somebody just comes in and like murders one of us and we're like, no, oh my God. Anyway, well, that's not what we're here to talk about today. We're here to talk about video games. And let's kick things off with an update on the PS5 Pro Enhanced rumors because we got another big old report on this one coming from The Verge. And we've got, you know, obviously it was like, I guess what? Must have been like 3 weeks ago, right? I feel like it was right before you moved where we kind of had those leaked specs.
Mm-hmm.
We had a lot of conversation about kind of us feeling like it's too soon, like it's not really the time for an upgrade in the weeks since. We haven't talked about it on the show, but there have been kind of rumblings from a few developers who have kind of had some similar opinions that it just doesn't feel like the time for such a device yet. But from what we're hearing now from this latest report, it seems like the thing may be like right around the corner.
Yeah, so Tom Warren at The Verge basically corroborated Insider Gaming's initial reporting. So he got his hands on the development documents. But in those documents, there was also a bunch of other things about this new PS5 Pro Enhanced label that's going to be applicable to certain games. So apparently Sony is asking developers to create new PS5 Pro exclusive graphics modes in games that combine Sony's new PlayStation Spectral Super Resolution (PSSR) upscaling to 4K with a 60 FPS frame rate and ray tracing effects. But that the label will still also be available for a variety of other scenarios that include 30 FPS games. But developers have the option to target resolution for PS5 Pro games that run at a fixed resolution. But there are a bunch of caveats around that if you just want to run your game at a more stable frame rate on PS5 Pro, that's not going to be enough for you to use the enhanced label. And that if you have like a variable resolution, say on the PS5 you go from 1440p to 2160p, and on the PS5 Pro it goes up to 1800p to 2160p, you also won't get the enhanced label. But Sony is apparently expecting game developers to have a single package that supports PS5 and PS5 Pro, same with the PS4 and PS4 Pro, and that they can patch existing games with like PS5 Pro modes. And that developers are apparently being asked to get this submitted for certification in August. So it's in line with the initial reporting that the console will be out for the holiday season, and apparently developers can now order test kits of the PS5 Pro to kind of get their games in order for that.
So what do you make of this enhanced label, right? Like obviously, I guess we have some of the kind of benchmarks here that we'll be talking about, but it's kind of interesting to me that it seems like you kind of need to hit some very specific bars for them to kind of consider you in this category. Like, what do you make of that?
I think it makes sense because I think gamers are going to want to know that when they see that label, it means something. It's not just, oh, this runs slightly better.
Right.
That I am getting something for it. That I am maybe getting ray tracing effects. I am getting this super resolution stuff. Maybe it runs at 60 FPS, whereas on the PS5 it runs at 30 FPS. So I think it makes sense to kind of give some kind of weight behind that enhanced label in the same way that they did with the PS4 Pro.
Yeah, to me, this kind of speaks to some of the concerns that you and Max and I discussed on the show previously, where there is kind of this attitude that the PS5 is already not necessarily living up to kind of the expectation that was maybe set with with the original consoles, right? And then the idea that like getting some kind of like pro model should come with, a significant bump in power. But when we haven't even seen the base model be able to achieve what was kind of promised, or what was marketed, that like it does lead to, um, I don't know, I guess just like weird marketing pain points and like things that like hyper vigilant eagle eyed fans will call you out on, right? Where it's like, we bring up all the time about how it's like it says 8K on the Xbox
Yeah.
Series X and the PS5 boxes, right? But like that's never gonna happen, or at least not properly. So like there is kind of
I feel like in Sony's case, that was really to sell the 8K TV they probably had coming out at the time.
sure, right? And like I actually wanted to pull a question that we got from the Discord this week. This one comes from Andy Rads, your dad, who wrote in and said Spencer's views, and this is quoting an interview with Phil Spencer. Spencer's views point to a collision of rising budgets, diversifying business models, and the exceptional financial risk now required to meet the audience expectations of a AAA release. But and this is your dad's question, but weren't those expectations fueled by both Sony and Microsoft prior to the release of the present generation of consoles, overpromising and under-delivering perhaps? And will the next generation of consoles deliver on the promise of this generation? And I think like to kind of tie it back to like what we've learned here, right? Like I thought that was an interesting kind of perspective that like I think
Mhm.
that a lot of people probably do share if you are maybe a little more dialed into like the marketing beats and you're not necessarily the gamer that I think for the gamer that just buys the PlayStation 5 because it's the next number and you know that it's better and you don't necessarily know about frame rates or tower flops or any of that kind of thing, you just are like this one's better than that one and that's observable to me and I don't know why. That's one thing. But when you've been promised kind of in marketing beats and everything that like this is the next generation and it's the most powerful console and we're going to achieve X and Y and Z, and then that doesn't happen, or like games come
Well,
out
Max
and
made a good point, right? That Sony made this whole thing about the SSD being so fast that these games could never run on anything else. It could only run on this hardware, like Ratchet and Clank, for example. And then we saw it running on PC. Like it runs on a standard SSD. It could run on that. I think for me, the biggest failing of this generation has been ray tracing. It was so hyped up. It was so promised at the initial launch of these consoles, or even pre-launch of these
sure.
consoles, that this was going to be the next big thing, and they were kind of tapping into what Nvidia was doing at the time, and obviously they're using AMD stuff. But I think because the hype around ray tracing was so high at that period of time with the new RTX cards, I think it was the 30 series cards that were out at the time, that they kind of felt that they needed to add ray tracing support, but these consoles just did not have enough horsepower behind them to really make that
And I
meaningful. Like we got some additional modes in Spider-Man, like a 40
yeah.
FPS mode, which made it, so you could have ray tracing but and also performance. But even then, it was such a big compromise. And I don't know about you, but I was looking for it. I was looking for ray tracing reflections. I was looking for ray traced shadows. I couldn't tell you the difference. Like,
Yeah, I got to be honest with you. I feel like ray tracing is one of those things that's just not. It doesn't. I don't know. I think it's. I'm at a place like with my relationship to graphics where like it's always been a graphics are a nice to have, not a must have. Like if it's a game that I like and it's also beautiful, then like that's great. But I don't feel like I really need ray tracing like in
mhm.
as a thing, and I thought it was a little like um over talked about for what its actual impact is on games and like their like sense of realism. Like I think having like more dense worlds is something that I think is adding a lot more sense of realism to a
Which is
game
something you're
than
not going to get
reflection.
with the PS5 Pro because
Well,
it has the same CPU in it.
and this is what I wanted to say, right? Was like I think, similar to the ray tracing thing, I think a lot of people kind of picked up on the whole like going into this generation, the expectation is going to be 60 FPS and it's going to be 4K and whatever. And
Well, and I
whenever
do kind of feel that we got accustomed to that at the beginning because it was, oh, we've got all these last gen games coming out.
right.
We just put a ton of extra horsepower behind it and we're just brute forcing our way to 60
And
FPS.
and my point being, right, is that now, whenever a game comes out and it doesn't hit that, like Dragon's Dogma 2, for example, is a game that's like targeting 30 FPS, right? Or Starfield targeted 30 FPS. And like that becomes a talking point, right? That
Hmm.
like oh, why is it that? Why isn't it hitting this benchmark? That's what we were supposed to be targeting. And I think when you have this kind of like enhanced moniker and you want to use that as a marketing beat and a talking point for, what the difference is for the PS5 Pro, it makes sense to me that they want to have this kind of more, like I guess stringent set of kind of like characteristics that like a game has to have to be enhanced, quote unquote, because otherwise you run the risk of being like, I paid extra for this so I could get these enhanced games that you told me were going to be better, and
Well,
Digital Foundry has a video showing me that there's actually no difference, but it says enhanced on this. And like it can easily become this like negative talking point among fans and during marketing if you don't have kind of a definitive checkbox of what an enhanced game is and what it is not.
hmm. Do you think we're going to see, because you mentioned paying for this, I presume you meant the console, but do you think we're going to see a point where you're paying more for these pro updates and we have like a
Um,
version that they charge for?
I wouldn't say no. It's like you never know
Because
with
there is presumably going to be some work that third-party devs are going to have to put in here. It's not just going to be a
right.
case of checking a box, because there is also something else that Tom Warren reported on over at The Verge, that there's going to be this Ultra Boost mode, which is similar to the PS4 Pro's Boost mode, that will help VRR modes run at higher frame rates and games can run at higher resolution. But it's really just like, again, brute forcing that, and it may break specific games. So games do need to be patched by developers to add in PSSR and to be able to
Yeah.
utilize the additional memory and things like that.
So I don't know. Like to your point, I did mean kind of like more like the tax of just like updating your console, right? Like that's an inherent investment. But I don't know, man. Like I guess I wouldn't be surprised, right? Like they do charge you extra money for the PS5 kind of assets already, right? Like that $10 up charge fee that is already pretty controversial. So the idea that they would add an additional tier to that to be like, now it's like a $15 upgrade or whatever is like, I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility, but I also would imagine that they probably recognize that that would be a very unpopular move and that it's, they're already getting the extra money by getting you to upgrade. And like, that's I don't know. That would be my bet if you were asking me to place a bet on what's going to happen. But if 2 weeks from now or whatever we find out that they're going to be charging for those upgrades, I don't come and say I told you so, because I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't put it past them. Is my point.
No, I wouldn't. And it's kind of crazy that we've got to a point where that's even a consideration, because I don't think it would have been on the last generation. But the fact that
Mm-mm.
Sony's been kind of nickel and diming and penny pinching everywhere to eke out as much cash as possible from their hardcore consumer base
Mm-hmm.
means that I do kind of query that. And God knows how much this console is going to cost, right? I think we spoke that it was maybe going to be like $700 without the drive. So if
You
you've
think
got to pay for
700?
that,
I don't know. I still think that seems high.
how much do you think it's going to be? 599, 699?
Yeah, I think so.
That's where I'm at. I think it's probably going to be between $600 and $700, and that's probably a digital only edition, and then you pay to add the drive on
Yeah, that's
in
like
the same way you do with the
an
PS5.
external thing.
Mm-hmm.
That would be my
That's a lot of
guess.
money, though. It's a lot of money for a
Yeah,
console.
definitely. But I mean, it's also like in the context of, I guess, like what, you know? Because it's like it is a lot of money to spend on a console, but it's like, I mean, we spent that much on our Steam Deck OLEDs, right? So it's like, like to me, if I already own a PS5, it's that same conversation we had before, right? Then it's like, yeah, like, am I going to spend $600 for this upgrade? No. But if I'm buying a new console
You're
and
probably going to get this one, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
because it's
I,
not
I
that much
also,
more, right? Like it's then it's $100 difference to what you were already planning on spending, which in the current state of like AAA gaming is like what the cost of one game. It's like, all right, yeah,
it
sure,
might actually be more than that. I wonder if we
game
get
and a
see a
half.
price cut on the. I wonder if we see a price cut on the PS5 when the Pro comes out, or whether the Pro is $200 more, not the $100 that people are kind of
I
thinking.
think
I
200 is
think.
just too much because it's just like what in this would cost that much? It's not enough of an upgrade technologically to warrant that much of a price jump. And I think if you do that, you're pricing out anybody that would even consider it.
Well, they're going to want to scrape back some cash on the R&D. I don't think they want to make the cost differentiation $100. It just doesn't seem like enough to me. So either they need to price cut the PS5, which I don't see them doing because they said it's only just become break
Wasn't
even
the price
again.
difference between the Pro and the PS5 at launch only like $50 though?
I couldn't tell you. I never ended up picking up a PS4 Pro.
I'm gonna look this up.
I also think this is one of those consoles where I could see you wanting to pick one up at some point if one specific game runs right. Imagine Spider-Man 3 comes out and it runs at 60 FPS on the PS5 Pro, but it only runs at 30 FPS on the PS5. That's probably a point where you do go, you know what, it's time for me to upgrade. I think a lot of people would be in that boat with specific games that can kind of shunt them towards picking up a new console.
Maybe, but I feel like the conversation we had about, kind of like what the actual material difference is just is like it's not the same thing, right? Like the difference that we got the difference that we got between the PS4 and the PS4 Pro was a much more significant jump than the difference between the PS5 and the PS5 Pro. Right? And I think it came at a time where that console was starting to show its age a little bit, and I don't think the PS5 has done that yet. I don't think we've hit a point where it's like this feels like it can't keep up with things, It's
No,
like
I don't feel like we've had that true next gen game yet where I can point to it and go, wow, this really feels like now it's like this could only have run on the next gen.
so PS4 Pro was $400 at launch.
Okay. And how
US.
much was the PS4 around that period? Do you know?
Let me find out.
Because that's the tricky thing. Is like obviously we know the launch price was probably it probably was the same price at
I don't think
launch.
I don't think it got a drop until then.
Because
Right?
we've seen PS5 get an increase.
Introductory price of the PS4 was 400.
And so I'd imagine it had a drop of $100 at that point, which makes it a difference.
Or it
in
dropped to 50, right? And it went down to
Mhm.
350. But either way, like I think the idea that I think it's probably either that this comes out and it's slightly more expensive and then the base model doesn't get a price change, or this comes out at the same price as the base model and the base model becomes less expensive.
Oh, I think this is going to be a lot more than the base model. I really do. I think this is probably
But like based on what?
$200 more than the
Why?
base. Like,
What justifies that cost? You think that they just
I mean,
want
there's
to make the
that
money on it? 'Cause
dedicated. Well, no, there's that dedicated like machine learning silicon that's in there. There's the additional RAM that they've put in there. There's
yeah, but
the
so what? Like, how much does that cost? Really? $200? I don't know. Like, I just don't.
I think it probably would, and I also think they're going to
Maybe. I don't know.
want to make some money on that R&D that they put into PSSR and
Yeah, but you
uh,
can't push that onto the consumer for something that's an optional upgrade. I just don't think you
mhm.
can. I don't think you can afford to do that, because then it's like, unless your expectation for it is that it's going to sell to a really small number of people.
That's what I think it is. This expectation is probably that this is more of a niche console than the PS4 Pro was, and
Sure.
that didn't sell anywhere near the numbers of the base PS4.
No, but that's not the expectation, right? It's not that it's going to sell the same number as the model that came before. It's that it's going to supplement sales and that it's going to get people that have been waiting to buy it and waiting for a slim model, waiting for an iteration that was better and more affordable or whatever, right? Or missed out on it at launch, that they'll buy, that people who bought a launch unit will rebuy, that people that maybe bought a launch unit and then sold it and then maybe want to get back in the it's like it feel like it's more about injecting a shot of energy into a generation than it is like the expectation that it's going to like come out and compete with that or something, right? Because it's like it's just not really it's not what you're doing. It's the same product ultimately. Like they're not competitors. They're like it's like their point of entry options.
Well, yeah, it's like the iPhone. You can either get the
Right.
base one or you get the Pro one, which has like a nicer camera and a better screen.
It's not like the Pro is a failure if it sells less than the base. Like it probably should sell less. It's the premium version, right?
I mean, less than the PS4 Pro rather than the base PS5 is what
Yeah.
I was saying. And I do think they're probably gonna be looking at that. They do track metrics across console generations,
Of course.
and they probably will be looking at that. And I don't think this is gonna sell anywhere near what the PS4 Pro did. And we don't even really have any kind of inclination of what a launch title is going to be for this console, if there is one at all, because
I think
we've
that's
been
like
told by them.
that's the thing, right? Is like when we talked about it a couple of weeks ago, like I just don't. I think at that point, like you were kind of. I think there was a lot of conversation of like, who is this for? What's the point of this? But then there was like, oh, Spider-Man's out, and materially it plays a lot better here. So like that could be the thing, right? For certain people, or like again, right? If you've been waiting around to grab one, we don't really have anything like that for this, and by all accounts, like the kind of big game they have this year is Final Fantasy, and it seems like it's underselling. So. At least compared to the first one, which was like a huge breakout hit. But like,
They also came late in the generation versus
there's just a lot less
generation
PS5s on the market
yeah.
right now, right?
Yeah.
So it's like that's kind of the other thing. So I don't know. Like I think that it's definitely a real question on whether or not this thing is able to connect with the broader market in any serious way.
Yeah, and it's really interesting to see the different approaches across the consoles, right? That we got some of this stuff that PlayStation's bringing in here, like the boost modes. We got that at launch on the Xbox Series X, where it boosted like previous generations of games.
Yeah.
So I'd be interested to see what they can kind of do with. Are we going to see anything where PS4 games run better here, or is it just going to be targeting the PS5 games? Are we going to see any kind of backwards compatibility stuff and enhancements there? And my guess would be no. But I don't think we're going to see Xbox come and do some kind of pro model this generation. It really feels to me like they're just like, no, what's the point? Like, why bother? Why do that when we can look further ahead and in 4 years' time launch the next generation of console? Because I don't know. I would struggle to buy a PS5 Pro, especially looking at what PSVR did, especially seeing that there's no games coming this year from seemingly first-party studios to support the PS5 Pro. I'd imagine they're putting the groundwork and the legwork in to update all of their previous titles. Like I'm sure The Last of Us Part 1 is going to look phenomenal on PS5 Pro and probably run at 60 FPS.
And I think it's one of those things too that you have to think about the fact that like I think a hardware iteration is not the same as like a piece of like an accessory launch, right? Like, because I think like, like I hear what you're saying when you bring up like the PSVR 2, but I don't really feel like it's that analogous because like I think that is something that came out and like it was an abject failure, right? Like
I do to some extent though,
well,
because
but
like
let me
look at the support that they've done for software for PSVR
but
2.
let me
Say
make
the
this point,
PS5
though.
comes out.
Let me make this point though, because I think with the Pro, it's not the same thing. Like it doesn't need to be supported in the same way that PSVR 2 does. Like, right? Like, I guess the question is do third parties not want to go to the effort of making this like enhanced mode for the PS5 Pro, and like is that the thing that ends up kind of being a point of contention where it's like, oh, like no one else does this but PlayStation, so therefore the number of games that are actually enhanced is lesser. But it also doesn't sound like that is really like the case, because we know that things like the variable refresh rate or like frame rate and stuff like that can be enhanced and not qualify as a enhanced label, you'd
Yeah.
still be getting a performance increase. So like to your point about PSVR, that is a product that came out and failed, and now they're not going to support it. Whereas with the PS4 Pro, if that PS5 Pro, if that comes out and it doesn't sell well and it ends up just being like there was no market motivation for people to move it in the same way that there is for just like a base model PS5, because everybody there's still a lot of demand for that console, even though I think from our perspective, right, from the dialed in perspective, there's that kind of like, what's the next big game? What do you have for me lately? Like, what's the thing this year? But like, that's clearly not a concern to the broader market, right? To the person that's just out there looking to buy a quote unquote next gen console, like they're not really considering an Xbox, they're buying a PlayStation. And if they didn't get it at launch or at the last couple of years, like a lot of them will go and get it this year because it's just the time in a new life cycle at which they feel ready to buy a new box. Like, there are people still buying PS4s, and breaking records with that console, right? So it's like, it's not like, not everybody buys the device at launch or within the first few years on the market or anything like that. And they're not thinking about whether there's a pro model coming or whether when the next console's coming or anything like that, because that's just not how they move and shake. They're not buying based on, the trends of the market, because they're not like dialed in like that. They're just the average consumer that was ready for a new device for whatever reason, So I think like Sony doesn't need to invest a lot of effort in supporting this thing in the way that they do the other devices that we've kind of seen them, like the PSVR 2, for example, because ultimately the device existing is all it needs to do to be of value to the person that is willing to spend $100 extra on it, right? Like, you do get a benefit for that additional investment, even if there's a very small number of games that actually take advantage of that fully, quote unquote, enhanced, kind of moniker. It's like, it'll still be a better performance than you get on a base PS5, which is what you paid for. And how many of those people are, that, like, if you're that dialed in, you probably own a PC, right? Like, you know what I'm saying? Whereas, like, there are a lot of
This
people.
is what I mean. I really struggle to see the market for it. But, Sony have known what they're doing for the last generation. I think I maybe just need to trust that they know what they're doing this generation. But I really think we can. I would not be surprised if we see mainly first-party titles doing the enhanced label, and that third-party developers are just like, well, I'm not going to bother. Why would I?
I mean,
What's the point
unless
in me
PlayStation gives them some incentive or something like that, because ultimately,
I could see for like exclusives, right? Like Final Fantasy
Yeah,
VII, I could have seen them doing the PS5 Pro exclusive graphics modes, but that's a lot of work for a cross-platform title. Say something from Ubisoft, right? I can't see them doing a PS5 Pro exclusive graphics mode that adds all of this like PSSR stuff in and upscaling to 4K and ray tracing effects, because they're not going to be doing that on the Xbox side.
they have to do it on
exist.
PC though.
To some extent, but PC is using different technologies. It's not the PlayStation API. They've not got to do anything with that SDK.
Yeah, but like, to me, it's like, and maybe I'm exposing my
and God knows what's going on the Nintendo side, right? If the Switch 2 seemingly is around the corner, maybe that's next year now, and there's some additional, like, there's some other stuff that they've got to look at. That's like 3 completely different platforms that these third-party devs have got to support with 3 different SKUs. Like, and like the Xbox already adds in a spanner with the works with the Series S.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. Like, it's like maybe you stop supporting Xbox, right? Because there's not a lot of sales there, and the idea that like making a PS5 version and then like a modified version that runs on PS4 if your game is not intensive enough, and then a modified version of that runs on the Pro. It's like, I don't know. Like, it's definitely more work and it's more effort, but like the PlayStation is kind of the dominant platform for consoles. So like, I don't know. Like, I think it's interesting because I remember feeling the same way about the PS4, about like is this going to speak to enough people to be a worthwhile product? And like ultimately ended up being something that did make sense, especially because it's something that they sold for years, right? It's not like a product that needs to launch and be successful on day one. It's something that they can launch and be like, hey, if you don't want to upgrade, if you don't see the value in it, that's fine. That's why we sell the original base PS5. Like, this is only for people that want that extra little bit of power. And, you know, to your point, maybe it is a game that comes out 2 or 3 years from now that does motivate you to upgrade, but that's all it takes. And that's all they need for it to be
I would
worthwhile.
need to upgrade. I'd want to upgrade this year or maybe next year, but then not at all after that. If the next generation's 2028, I'd feel like, oh man, I'm getting closer and closer and closer. It's the same thing with the Switch, right?
But think about how many people like end up in it. Like with you were about to bring up the Switch with like the OLED Switch though. Like think about how many. Like I mean, I bought one and I've been using it for years now.
No, I know, but
I
was the person who was like, well, I'm not going to do the OLED model because I feel like the Switch 2 is next year, and then I think it's next year, and then I think it's next year. But we do have a definitive timeline.
3 years later, and I'm like, I've been using it all this time, and it was not money poorly spent, and I could see that happening with PS5. And you also got to think, right? Like maybe it is a couple years from now, and there's a Black Friday sale. It's $100 off. It's the same. I'll sell my original one for $200, and then I'm only spending $200 to upgrade. You know what? Like you start justifying it to yourself because it's, you feel like a new toy. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe you're right. I think the enhanced stuff is gonna be interesting. I do wonder what titles we're going to see at launch. I can imagine they're really kind of going to tap into that enhanced label because I don't think they've got anything new for us this year, really.
Yeah.
Aside from what we've already seen.
Doesn't seem like it. Well, speaking of new stuff, we got a couple more news stories for you in just a second here. But before we do that, let me remind you that this episode of the FlipScreen Games podcast is brought to you by our Patreon producers for the month of April. They are, of course, Arnold J. Rimmer, Christopher Valenz, Gabriel Hasselmeyer, a.k.a. Sobe, Snackago, Steve Stompy, Susan Likes Cats and Also Boobies, Voodoo Vic, Ty the Dude, and Wakahula. Thank you all so much for your support over on patreon.com/FlipScreenGames. You all the reals to the real, and we greatly appreciate your support of this and all of our sister shows. Remember, if you want to go show your support just like they did, if you want to write in just like everyone did for the question block, if you want to go check out those sister shows or just get involved in the community and keep the conversation rolling between episodes, you can do all that and much, much more by heading over to flipscreen.games. That's our website where you will find links to all the places we are all over the web, however you choose to get involved or show your support. Thank you for joining us on another episode of the show. All right, Steve. Here's where we're at. Here's where we're at. We have another news story we could talk about. I feel like it'll take us through the rest of the show. Or we could do it. We could answer a fun question and maybe get through a couple questions. Where are you at?
You know what? Let me just quickly touch on the news story. Emulators are now available on the App Store on iOS.
Bam.
That's
Bam. What's up, Apple
story.
people?
Yeah.
Welcome to 2016, 2012. Yeah, I don't know.
Specifically, it's retro emulators, and this was one of the main reasons that people wanted these third-party marketplaces that Europe's now allowing.
Mm-hmm.
But they're available. The first one showed up on the App Store this week. It got removed because basically they copied someone else's work, but expect to see some more soon.
There you go. All right, I want to jump into this question I saw on the gaming subreddit earlier today that I thought would just be like a fun little icebreaker for us. We haven't done one of these in a while. What's a popular feature in games that you don't care about? I want to start. It's ray tracing.
The ray tracing looks fucking amazing.
It does,
when it's on hardware that can actually support it.
It does, but I gotta be 100% with you, dude. I feel the same way about ray tracing the way that I do. Like I remember when Spider-Man first came to PC, and I remember friend of the show, Patreon producer Zaid, sent me a picture of like, I got it on my big ass curved monitor, and it's fucking 120 FPS and blah blah blah. And I'm just like, I gotta be real with you. I don't know that this adds a lot to the moment to moment experience of playing this game. And it's like
maybe it doesn't.
It's cool.
It's
looks literally nice. Cool. But it feels to me very like cool in a Digital Foundry breakdown kind of way versus like how I feel playing this game kind of way. And that's the stuff I care about.
I think there's one specific implementation of ray tracing that is meaningful, and that's global illumination, where basically it mimics the sun,
Yes, I'll give
and
you that. That is
the
cool.
whole world can then show what
Like
light
dynamic
does.
lighting like that.
Yeah, that's really cool. We've rarely seen it in games. There's one on console I know of, which is Metro Exodus. And it runs okay, but when we see RTGI in video games on consoles, I'll be impressed. For me, I don't give a shit about achievements. I know that's probably a crazy thing for a lot of people,
Eh,
but I've never cared about achievements. I don't care about trophies. I'm not the kind of person that platinums a game or does any of that stuff. I genuinely don't care. And I feel like sometimes it can spoil parts of the game. And you look at the achievements, if they're not properly hidden away, or you're kind of trying to figure out if you've got everything. I don't know. I've never been a completionist in a game, so achievements do nothing for me.
yeah, I feel like I'm kind of like ambivalent about them, you know? Like I think that I think they're a good idea, period, right? Like I think having them is better for your game than not because I think it incentivizes um people to play the game more. It incentivizes you to play it in different ways and to maybe experience content that you wouldn't have experienced and things like that can definitely extend the longevity of your experience with the game. And the culture around like trophy hunting and achievement hunting or whatever, right, is like obviously something that a lot of people get a lot out of. I've never really been like that about it. Like I certainly am a trophy hunter sometimes, right? Like I will platinum games when I really like them. If they have an achievable platinum for sure. Like I've platinumed all the Spider-Man games, right?
Mhm.
Because ultimately that boils down to like 100% all the content. And it's like, yeah, sure, I'll definitely do that, right? Because it's not a very long game, and the kind of extra couple hours I spend to check those last couple boxes or just feel like kind of it's almost like the icing on the cake way of just like, yeah, I really enjoyed this experience and I want to wring every last drop out of it, right? And like I hit a point where I'm like, there's literally nothing else for me to do. Okay, done. And like that is the completionist, I think, in me more than it is like the trophy hunter, you know?
Yeah.
Um and even that, right? Like I'm a completionist when I feel like being a completionist. It's not something that I'm like married to across the board. So I definitely get that. I feel like it's one of those things that like if it if you get something out of it, you get something out of it, and if you don't, then that's cool.
You got anything else you hate? Because I've got a few.
Yeah, I've got a few. I think one of the I I guess this is kind of like a multifaceted one, but it's like I would say broadly it would be multiplayer.
Oh, really?
Because it's not that I don't
Multiplayer and single player experiences, or just multiplayer in general?
more the latter, but on some level the former.
Okay.
Because there's so and like grain of salt with that comment, right? Like let me walk that back because I think it's mostly online multiplayer. Like I like multiplayer. There are plenty of multiplayer games that I really enjoy. And I mean there are plenty of online multiplayer games I
I was
really
gonna
enjoy,
say
right?
League,
Right?
multiverses,
Yeah, exactly.
Pokemon
So
Snap.
it's not me sitting here saying, you mean Pokemon Go?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, what's the Snap game? Marvel Snap.
Marvel Snap. Okay, I was like Pokemon Snap. Sorry, you're right.
They should probably get on that.
Something there. Uh right. Like that's not a thing I like. It's not a hard rule, right? There are lots of multiplayer games I've gotten into and I think like, it happens to me. Like again, like the Halo 3 is a game that like some of my fondest gaming memories of my youth are playing that online with my friends, and like it's not that I don't like online games per se, but it's like that as a selling point is not like the question is what are popular features that you don't care about. I kind of feel that way about it where it's like usually the reason I get into one of those games is because they're really, really fucking good, more so than because I crave that kind of experience, you know? And I've had years and bouts of time where I was more dialed in like that. And I was more like, I was jumping on and playing multiplayer games with my friends a lot, and you and I were streaming them together and stuff like that. But like in my spare time when I'm just playing games for pleasure, that's not the genre I go to like
Yeah.
ever really, and not never again, but it's like they're few and far between. The last game like that I really was like, in like that was Marvel Snap, right? And it's like, and I'm just getting back into that now actually. But it's been a minute, and it's like, I played Halo like that, but like I fell off, and I'm not really that kind of gamer unless I get hooked on a game or some friends are playing something and they like wrote me into it, and then I find that fun and I get in a rhythm with them. But even that, like with the way that my schedule is and stuff, it gets hard to be like, how do I like make time to regularly jump on with a squad and play? And if I'm not playing that way, it's inherently less fun, and it just,
Yeah, that's understandable. I think another one for me, skill trees. They drive me crazy. It's not even something I don't care about. And I think maybe it's more the implementation of them.
really
But
skill trees.
I really, really dislike when it doesn't show you the whole tree and there's no real clear path to what I actually want, and the one thing I want I've got to grind for about 100 years to go down the skill tree to get to the one section.
Huh.
Far Cry used to be an absolute nightmare for this. Like you could never get like the one thing you wanted. Far Cry 5 was horrible. Like you had to go get those perk points and you'd have to go do all those weird little prepper stashes to get them, and then you would eventually get down the tree to the one section you wanted. Or if you screwed up somewhere you couldn't do anything. Reassigning points needs to be in every single game with skill trees, but man, I find them so annoying. So annoying.
One for me is photo mode.
Oh God, so
I just don't
like,
care.
no, I don't care either. Most of the time, like the games that I've wanted to take screenshots in don't have photo mode. Like
Even when
Breath
they
of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom,
yeah,
those are games that I'm taking snapshots of experiences that are happening in the game. I'm not
yeah,
pausing to go, let
to
me look
just
at the
like
nice
take pictures.
landscape.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, again, it's like I'm not like raining on anybody's parade. It's like if you like that, like that's like I appreciate the photos people take more than I would ever take them, is the thing. Like it's a feature
Yes.
I don't care about, right? That doesn't mean that I don't think it's dumb or something like that. But it's
I
just
guess
like,
you care about the output, but not
yeah.
not the
And it's
the
like, I
input, yeah.
guess, right? Like it's cool, but I'm not like dying for that. I'm not like, oh boy, thank God this game got a photo mode. All that content's gonna be off the chain. It's more just like the other day, like I saw some really nice ones from like Horizon Forbidden West, and it's like, damn, yeah, it's a pretty game. I totally get why you did that, and also like it's not something I would do. I feel the way about user generated content, and not that like, again, not that I don't enjoy it, but more that like any game that's like, we have like a builder mode where you can build your own levels. It's like, cool. I'll never do that.
Oh, see, I didn't. I loved playing them though. Like Far Cry Arcade
But that's what I'm
really
saying.
fun.
Is like playing it is yeah, like I'm in
Yeah,
on that. But
we had
like,
the same conversation about Mario Maker. I think
yeah,
it was
it's
just
like I'm not gonna make
you,
a Mario Maker
yeah,
level. Like, no, I can't believe I just said
yeah, but
Mario. Did you hear
you can
that?
go play the ones.
I hit that with like the hard New Jersey Italian accent. Mario. I'm not playing I'm not making a Mario level. Sorry. Go ahead.
Another what was another one for me? I had one. Oh, because I've been watching Fallout on Amazon, and we'll probably talk about that a bit next week. And I realized
No spoilers. You liking it?
it's great, yeah, but no spoilers. I realized I hate base building in pretty much every single game that has it, especially specifically Bethesda games.
So,
Didn't do
okay.
any of it in
Okay.
Starfield. Didn't do any of it in Fallout.
Let me hit
Did
you with
not care
something.
about the settlements. I thought it was so dull.
Let me hit you with something. I was thinking about this recently. How fucking funny is it that you and I don't like base building, but we like management games? Because it's like, I like building a base when that's the point of the game. But if it's not the point of the game, I'm like, why the fuck? I'm not going to the base. Who gives a fuck about the base? Like,
No, I didn't. I never care about it. Like in Starfield, I remember talking to Ray about it, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I got it making this like production line. It gets out all this stuff at the end, and then I'm using that to upgrade my ship." And I'm just like, I did not engage with that mechanic at all in Starfield, and I still had a great time with that game. But for me, it's just something I can ignore. As long as I can ignore it and it's not mandatory. I remember having to do it in Fallout 4. There's like, because you have to do it for that one settlement you get to. And then they send you off on a side quest to do it again. And I was just like, oh man, this is so tedious. Having to build a base with a controller and like, I don't care if these people die. I just really don't. Like, they're nothing to me. They're just bland NPCs that mean absolutely nothing.
What else you got?
Let me have a look at my list. One that struck me because I saw it in the comments was when single player games require online functionality to work. Because I ran into this last year with Diablo, and I'm on holiday, and I'm just like, yes, I'm so excited. Diablo 4 is finally out, and I can dig in and get my teeth into it. And then you run up against that wall of, oh, you need an online connection to be able to play. And it's just like, why? Why do I need that online connection? I know the same thing was with Power World, right? One of the biggest games
Yeah.
so far, and it's of this year, and it's just like, oh, can't play it unless you're connected to the internet.
Another one that I definitely agree. I think that's like it speaks to the thing I said about multiplayer, where it's like I think a lot of people play games to have a solitary experience, and like I don't want to be online. Like I just
Hmm.
don't want to have to be online. Like unless I'm intentionally interacting with something that's online content, why the fuck do I need to be connected to the internet? That's so dumb. And it also like puts you in a weird position. Like what happens when that game stops getting supported eventually?
Yeah, that's the real concern. I think that
Or the
it's
servers
essentially
go
just
down,
another form.
like just because, like if
Yeah, it's just another form of DRM at that
yeah,
point.
it's like so
And it's
like you're
just like
telling me if my
great.
internet's out, I can't play this fucking $70 game that I paid for. Cool, like why? Um, this is actually related to Diablo. So sorry in advance, but like games with loot, like
Oh, I
randomized
love that. I love loot
randomized
loops.
loot.
So fun.
I fucking hate that shit. Because it's just like
Did you ever get into Vampire Survivors? I can't remember if
I
you did.
did,
Like,
and like that game is like I don't know. It's interesting because it's not that like I have a problem with RNG, right? Like, because it's like I like Pokemon, which has like a ton of math and RNG and like dice rolls. You know, like I like D&D based
Baldur's
like
Gate 3 was
right,
that, yeah.
yeah. So it's like it's not that like random chance is the thing I don't like, but like I find it to be really annoying to be playing a game that is like about progression, right? And having my progression not be tied to my skill is like really fucking irritating. Because like I had that happen when I was playing Monster Hunter World, right? When that came out, I remember there was like, oh, I'm grinding for this specific gear item, so I need to go on this hunt, and the item that I need is like, a fucking 25% drop likelihood, and I've done 10 of these, and I haven't even gotten one, or something like that. And it's just like, this is not fun. Like, you're literally just punishing me because like I'm being forced to play the same content over and over and over again to get a result that I have no control of the outcome, right? Like I can't play better. I can't, like, there's no like way for me to modify the drop rate. Like there's no way for me as a player to influence the outcome other than to be lucky. And when that's something that's like not inherent to gameplay, I think that's fine. Like I think about like shiny Pokemon, for example, where like that's a super small percentage chance, and yeah, like there are things you can do to increase the chance or whatever, right? But like ultimately, that happening to you is like a cool organic moment for your game, but it's not something that if it doesn't happen, that it like limits your progress. Whereas like in that game, I literally could not get this armor, so therefore I'm behind all my friends, and they're having to fucking come do this boring quest with me 100 times so that I can get the armor I need to go do the next raid or whatever. And it's like, this is just bullshit. Like, this is like, it's busy work, and it's not fun, and it ends up just feeling like a waste of time.
Which is exactly how I feel about skill trees and at times. It's just like, oh, I'm just chipping away and grinding to get XP points so I can get the next cool thing I want.
But
Or
like I don't understand why you like one and not the other, because one of them is random. Like it's like if I want a skill tree and I'm like, oh,
because one
like
of them's the thrill of what do I get, and it's like playing a scratch card, and I could win
yeah, I mean like
something really cool.
I guess it's just a fundamental like difference, because like I don't like gambling for that reason, because I
I
think it's like
I do.
it's not rewarding, because it's just like I didn't do anything for this. It's like, yeah, like it's obviously extremely rewarding if you fucking do it and it works, but like the statistical likelihood of it working is so low that my brain is just like, well, then why would you waste your time and money? And like for me, when it comes to a video game, it's like, yeah, like this is not an experience worth having. It's like if I want to get this ability, like at the end of a skill tree or something like that, right? Like I like that I can just be like, okay, well then that's a goal to work towards, right? And it's like I think it's the same reason that like I find the like open world checkboxy type game satisfying, is that like there's a clear tangible sense of progression, and like
Mhm.
that feels satisfying to my brain in a way that um like looking at numbers go up on a screen is not, you know?
It's understandable. Yeah, I think in the case of Diablo, I think they do a good job of enabling you to progress without having legendary weapons. There are
Yes.
always ways to do it. You can re-roll. You
Yeah.
can do all sorts of things. So there is ways around
And it's
it.
more skill
But
based. Like you could
yes,
play better with worse gear, and that's like an option,
so
Whereas like
I don't think it's an. I can understand your dislike for it. I think for me, something like The Division got it wrong, where I felt like I was just if you had crappy weapons, they were just bullet sponges. You could shoot them a million times, and that person was not going to die. And that's like a case where the loot loop was wrong and it was bad, and I think it could have been improved. But I love loot. I think it's fun. I had a great time in Destiny when I played that. I love Diablo. I think it's one of my favorite types of loops in a video game.
get any other ones?
Other than the obvious that are like aren't popular features because nobody fucking likes
Yeah, it's
them
got to be a
anyway, like
popular feature.
microtransactions, and no one likes those. It's like,
Yeah.
but I can't really think of anything else that's a popular feature that I dislike.
The last one that I'm gonna just like take a side swipe at is I think I find it really annoying. So I don't have a problem with collectibles in an open world or anything like that, but I fucking really dislike when games make you take an action to pick up a resource that there is no reason you would not pick up. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yes, so you have to click a thousand times to
uh-huh.
pick up
Like
something.
it's
Yeah,
like in Horizon when it's like there's like three things
there's
of
plants.
sticks,
Yeah,
and it's like
yeah.
grab the stick, grab the stick, grab the stick, and it's like, can you just pick them all up? Or like I'm playing Final Fantasy Rebirth this year, right? And it's like that'll happen where like if you're on the chocobo and you go over something, it'll just like pick it up, and it's like great, and it's you just get it all. Whereas like if you're on the ground, you have to individually like pick up each, and it's just like, why do I have to press this button 5 times for something, like when I don't have a finite, like if it's like a game where there's
If
like
it's like Diablo, where I'm inventory
where I can
managing,
get
or
encumbered,
Resident Evil, yeah,
then like sure. But like if the game is just like you can pick anything up and there's no limit on carrying resources, then why would you not just auto pick up every resource that you come across? Like that doesn't make any sense.
yeah. No, I'm with you on that one. Um, but I guess it's just removing friction. But maybe it's people like that. Maybe it's a satisfying. Oh, I'm spamming the A button or the X button because people love jump buttons in video games for
Yeah,
that
I
same
know.
reason. You're
You're
walking
right.
along, you're pressing jump, and I'm doing something as I'm moving.
Yeah. Yeah, and maybe it's as simple as that, is that like taking an action is more satisfying than passively in like engaging with something. That's like why you play a video game. But I think there are just some things like that that I hit where I'm like, just do it for me. Like man, like it's like the thing that people would joke about with like Red Dead Redemption 2, where it's like actually it's more immersive in a video game if I press a button and he just opens the cabinet and takes out what I want, rather than having to be like press a button to lift your
Oh
arm and
God,
then
do you
open it and then
remember
open it
heavy
and then
rain and like you
yeah, exactly, like that type of
you
shit where
like
it's like
you push the stick up and go round to like do the handle on the door, and it's just like, come on,
reminds me
seriously?
reminds me so much. There's this this bit in Futurama where like the one with the giant like trash ball is coming and they have to launch the rocket and Fry goes to push the
Mhm.
button and he just misses the button. He goes, oh, whoops. And like, it's like just like this like anticlimactic moment. And it's like, it so feels like that whenever it's like you're like steering a fucking like marionette, It's like, yes, so immersive. That's how everyone's arms move. Like,
Like you're
so,
playing a game of co-op all day long, yeah.
yeah, it's like, what the fuck? Just press the button and like do the thing that I am thinking.
You
Like,
know what? Most
that
of the time,
feels
I don't
immersive.
even want to press a button to open a door. I just want to walk through it. Let me walk into it. And there's a bunch of those things that I kind of dislike that take you out of the immersion as well. Like in Rockstar games, it was only doors with gold handles you could go through. So you like look for the gold handle to go
Yeah,
into it in GTA, or like the yellow paint that's everywhere. But games have kind of moved away from that to some extent, where you have like an R1 button that would like show you focus to show where you can go, where you can traverse and stuff. Like
sure.
those kind of things I dislike as well, because it really kind of, especially if it's a game where I'm enjoying the narrative and the experience, it kind of just takes you out of it, and it's just like, oh, okay, it's not quite as immersive as I thought, because that door's got a silver handle, so it means I can't go in there. This one's got a gold one, so I can
I
go
don't
in here.
mind it with yellow paint and stuff like that because I like visual communication in a game. Like that was something that we talked about not that long ago, was like the wind feature in Ghost of Tsushima, right? Where
Yeah.
it's like that's like such an intuitive thing where it's like I need a hint and like it's this like non-invasive way to do that. I feel that way about like gold, like the paint marking and stuff like that, because it's like it's a way for the game to communicate with me that something is something I can interact with without it being like here's a flashing highlight over the, it's like
Oh
it's
yeah, well, Resident Evil used to do that. It would like
yeah.
sparkle on the floor. It's
And
just like,
it's
oh,
one of those
there's
things
something
where it's
here.
like, is it you got to suspend your disbelief a little bit, right? Because it's the
Yes,
limitations
yes.
of what you're, and it's like what works for you is going to, be different. And some people would maybe like something that's like less quote unquote immersive because it's like, the paint thing is like, well, I'm asking the question of who put this paint here, or right, or like why are there
Yeah,
torches? Why are
or
there torches
why
in
are
the
the torches
dungeon?
lit?
Right?
Yeah,
Like, yeah,
who lit
exactly.
these?
But and it's like a thing of like you either ask that question or you don't, right? Like you either suspend your disbelief or you don't, and it's like you
No,
need
I
to.
think it's less that, and in the case of like GTA or Red Dead, right? It's like, oh, this world is so massive that I can go everywhere, I can do anything, and then you
Exactly. So
get to
that when
that
you
one
can't, then it's
door,
like
you
fuck
can't
you.
go, and it's like,
Yeah.
oh,
And
it's not quite there then.
you'd rather it be, at least I feel like I would rather it be something like Tears of the Kingdom or Breath of the Wild, where it's like there's an argument of like, oh, parts of the world feel empty. It's like, right, but the parts that don't are really deep.
Full, yeah,
And the parts that are empty are like, yeah, I mean, there are parts of the world where there's not stuff going on. Like that's,
yeah.
like sometimes you walk in the woods and you don't see anybody. You don't see an animal and that just happens, but then like when you do, it's like it's dynamic and alive and not like, this kind of stagnant scripted event.
hmm Yeah, I think that's really kind of where I'm at. It's like it just breaks the immersion. It's just like, oh, okay,
It's
not
it's like it's
quite
the
there.
difference of being like, it's like that old saying of like you're like, it's a mile wide and an inch deep, is like
Yes,
that
yeah.
that is yeah, that is so annoying. I would much rather have I like this is a generally a thing I feel about, and I would rather have open areas than an open world. A fully open world, usually.
I don't mind an open world, but the open world does not need to be
It's not that I
ginormous.
don't like an open world, but it's that I think that there are many open worlds that where like volume and size and scope is what is valued over
Yes. Which I
quality.
think was one of the biggest arguments against Starfield last year, was just like, this is not a cohesive open world. They were more open areas. Like I go to a planet, it's an open area, I can explore it, I can look around it, it's a smaller environment, and then I go on to the next one. And people wanted what Skyrim was. And it's like I can walk from one end of the map to the other.
Yeah.
And it's like yeah. But in Skyrim it really did feel densely packed, and that there was always something there. And there were those those elements where there weren't anything, but it's just like I look around and it's like, oh, it's nice wildlife, it's nature, it looks great, and I can
It always
enjoy
felt
it. And
contextual.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, all right, we'll leave it there for today. That was a fun action. Oh God, hold on.
Right at the end of the show, he decided
Right?
to just pull his cable out and break his
Jesus,
microphone.
this freaking cable, man. Hold on. Okay. All right, everybody. Hold on. Don't worry. It's going to be okay. Okay. All right. My backup is rolling. I think it's fixed. Don't worry, everybody. Maybe I cut this and you didn't even hear it. But if I didn't cut it and you did hear it, thanks for being a good sport. I appreciate you. And guess what? You made it all the way to the end of the show. Thank you guys for joining us here in another episode of the FlipScreen Games Podcast. If you guys want to write in with your thoughts on this week's show or with a topic that we can discuss on next week's show, you can do all that and much more by heading over to flipscreen.games. That's our website where you will find links to all the places we are all over the web, including our Patreon, our Discord, our sister shows. However you choose to get involved or show your support, that is the best place for you to go and get more FlipScreen games in your life. However you choose to do so, we thank you for tuning in to another episode of the FlipScreen Games Podcast. For the crew, I've been Pete. He's been Steve. We'll see you next week.